Something happened to me, and so far I haven't found enough words to explain it, but I need to try. Because if I keep this to myself, I think I'll lose what little sanity I have left. I arrived in Savannah, Georgia in the late afternoon, when the sun was low and that Spanish moss hanging from the trees looked like aged hands watching me pass by. The house I rented was near Historic District, a Victorian building 3 stories high with a long balcony and tall windows that creaked in the damp wind coming from the river. It wasn't my style of accommodation, too old, too quiet, but the price was good and I needed a few days away from everything. Away from people. Away from certain memories. When I pushed open the door, I smelled a strong scent of damp wood, as if the house had just woken from a deep, unpleasant dream at my arrival. The floorboards creaked under my steps, echoing throughout the entire structure. For a moment I had the impression that something responded, as if the creak above me was a step, but slower, heavier. But I was tired. My whole body felt like it was vibrating with anxiety, the kind that leaves your chest tight all the time. So I ignored it. I took a shower, ate something quick, and lay down in my first floor room. I tried to relax, but there was a strange chill on the back of my neck, as if someone were standing right behind me, motionless, breathing softly. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I need to sleep, I thought. Tomorrow everything will seem normal. But it didn't seem so. To the 2:48 am I woke up to a clear, loud sound, impossible to mistake. Steps that know upstairs, heavy, dragged, going from one side to the other at an irregular pace, as if someone were groping their way along the ground in the dark. My heart froze. Because that entire house, it was only mine. And I was absolutely certain that I had locked all the doors. But the footsteps were still there. Slow. Human, and each of them seemed closer. I shouldn't have gotten up, but I got up. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step protesting under my weight as if trying to warn me to do not continue. The whole house seemed to hold its breath. There was no wind, no cars passing outside, just that thick silence that makes your ears more sensitive than they should be. When I reached the second floor hallway, the footsteps stopped. They haven't decreased. They didn't move away. They stopped as if whatever was walking there knew exactly where I was. My hands were so sweaty I almost dropped my phone. I opened the Airbnb app, more on impulse than logic, maybe to confirm that I was really alone. But what caught my attention was something else. The internal cameras, the ones the host mentioned in the description, were all switched off. And there was a scheduled time for that point, 3:17 a.m. I looked at the clock on my cell phone. They were 3:17 a.m. Exactly at that minute. Shivers ran down my spine as if icy fingers were touching it. The sweat on my hands turned cold, almost frozen. I tried to turn the cameras back on, but the app only showed, access denied. That's when I noticed something behind the back bedroom door. A tiny crack through which a patch of darkness escaped, but the shadow wasn't still. It was trembling as if someone were on the other side, breathing too close to the wood. I took a step back. The door seemed to vibrate slightly. The host responded to my message with a confusing text. This has never happened before. Stay on the first floor. Don't open any doors upstairs. Why did she say none? My chest began to tighten. I felt a chill run up my legs as if the floor were draining all the heat from my body. The bedroom door creaked, a soft sound, almost a wail. That's when I decided to look up the address. And I found an old article with a desperate tone that spoke of a guest who died there. In the back room. The 3:17 a.m. The shadow behind the door stopped trembling, and something crawled to the base of it as if pressing its face to the ground right next to me. I don't remember breathing for the next few minutes. I think my body went into a kind of primal alert state, where everything around me disappears and only instinct remains. Pure fear. I started down the stairs quietly, each step slow and measured, trying not to provoke anything, whatever was up there. The house seemed smaller, more cramped, as if the walls were leaning inward. When I got to the first floor, I opened the app again, trying to gain some control over the situation. And that's when the air left my chest. In the guest section, where it should only appear me name, it was written, current guest, 1 additional guest, 1. My throat went dry instantly. I blinked and refreshed the page several times. Nothing changed. The place was registering someone, with me. I tried to leave through the front door, but it simply wouldn't open. The doorknob turned, but the wood seemed swollen, as if it had absorbed water from the inside out. Each pull made a dull, muffled creaking sound, as if something were pressing against the other side of the door. It was at that moment that I heard at the top of the stairs. The lowest, and most devastating, sound I've ever heard. A breath. It wasn't human. Or perhaps she was too human, too deep, too wet. She seemed to adjust to my rhythm. When I held my breath, the sound upstairs paused too. When I released it released it along with me. I looked slowly at the staircase. One silhouette, she stood there, motionless, in a spot where the light couldn't reach. Only her form was visible, tall, thin, leaning forward as if her neck were too long for her body. She didn't move. She made no effort to hide. She simply observed. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath started to be smelled in the air, and behind me at the window, the Spanish moss tapped slowly against the glass, like impatient fingers. My body froze when I realized something else. The silhouette was not alone. Something was dragging itself next to her, low, close to the ground, as if it were standing on all fours. Suddenly my cell phone vibrated. It was a notification from Airbnb. Your presence has been detected. Thank you for your continued stay. I didn't touch anything, and he was no longer breathing on his own. I don't know how I found the strength to run. Maybe it was pure desperation, or maybe my body understood that if I stood still for another second, that thing on the stairs would come down to me. I stumbled across the room, bumping into furniture, pulling at the back door so hard my hands ached. It wouldn't open. None of them would. The locks vibrated as if something on the other side was holding. Breathing quickened at the top of the stairs. It became more lively. As if that were preparing. I felt a sudden warmth on my neck, a warm breath that ran across my skin and made my stomach churn. But when I turned around, there was nothing there. Nothing visible, at least. My phone vibrated again. A new notification from Airbnb. Additional check-in confirmed. Upstairs room, occupied. My chest began to ache. The feeling that someone was behind me intensified so much that it felt physical, palpable, like fingers about to touch my shoulders. I ran to the bathroom, slammed the door, and froze. The lamp flickered above me, emitting an irregular, almost irritated hum. I was trembling all over, sitting on the cold floor, trying to hear any movement outside. And then came the sound. Low. Dragged down, like fingernails slowly creeping up the door. I don't remember exactly how long I was in there. It could have been minutes or hours. The only thing I know is that at some point the noise stopped. And the silence that filled the hallway was so profound that it seemed fake. The house was not empty. I could feel it on my skin. I ran out without looking back, gathered my things as best I could, and tried the front door again. This time it opened, as if it had never been locked. I left without closing the door, without breathing, without thinking. I drove until dawn. My whole body trembled as if the cold of that house had clung to me. When I finally stopped in a gas station parking lot, I received a message from the hostess. Have you seen her? Everyone sees her, but only when the room is registered as occupied. I looked at the app.my reservation was still open, and right below in red. His stay is still ongoing. I closed my phone with a trembling hand. Because ever since that night, every time I try to sleep, I hear very slow, very heavy footsteps walking right above me. And I'm no longer in Savannah. If you're enjoying this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. Something happened to me, and I still can't explain it. But if you've come across this account, please believe every word. I arrived in Savannah, Georgia. It was a sweltering afternoon, when the air felt too heavy for late autumn. The mansion where I was going to stay was just a few minutes from Forsyth Park. One of those centuries-old houses with a deep veranda, dark wood, and Spanish moss hanging like strands of wet hair. I needed a few days away from everything, away from work, away from my own head. I thought that old quiet place would help me. The host left me alone shortly after handing over the keys and giving quick instructions. The whole house smelled of damp wood, old books, and something slightly sweet, like the perfume of someone who no longer lives there. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling that grew when the floorboards creaked under my footsteps. Old houses do that, I kept repeating to myself. That first night, while I was exploring the second floor, I noticed something that wasn't mentioned in the advertisement. A half-open door at the end of the hallway. There was no reason for it to be there. The mental map of the house I'd done earlier simply didn't include that space. But the narrow crack let out a cold draft and a smell of mold so old it made me swallow hard. I pushed slowly. It was a children's bedroom frozen in time. Faded blue wallpaper, wooden toys, crooked shelves, and a rocking chair that was moving. Very slowly. Without wind. Without reason. The creaking filled the room like a lament. And for a moment, I was certain that someone had been sitting in it seconds before I opened the door. My whole body went cold. I closed the door. I shouldn't have opened it. The next morning, I decided I needed to clear this up. It wasn't possible that an entire room had been omitted from the listing. Maybe it was just an old storage room, a forgotten space. Something rational. Something normal. I called the host when he came by to drop off some towels that I asked him to accompany me upstairs. He seemed calm, until we reached the hallway. "Which door?" he asked, frowning. I pointed or I tried to point it out. Why the door wasn't there. Where I had seen the children's room, there was only a single straight wall covered by vintage floral wallpaper. It was yellowed with age. I touched the surface. It was solid. Cold. As if it had never been opened. The host watched me with a strange unease, almost as if he were afraid of me, and not of the house. "Perhaps you're mistaken. These houses are rather labyrinthine," he said, avoiding eye contact. I wanted to believe it. Truly, but that night while I was trying to sleep, I heard the first sound. Something hitting no broker. Very light. Like a wooden toy had rolled and stopped at my bedroom door. Then, small steps. Dragging steps, and a breath, short, unsteady, coming from somewhere I couldn't locate. I lay motionless, staring into the darkness as if it could stare back. The silence of the mansion was so profound that the slightest sound seemed like a confession. With each new creak of the floorboards, I felt a cold weight rise up the back of my neck. And then, the rocking chair. I heard that same one. Slow creaking, muffled, as if it were being activated behind a wall. I turned to the side, trying to control my breathing, and whispered to myself, "Maybe I'm tired, maybe I'm hearing things." But deep down I knew I wasn't. If you've listened this far, get ready. Things only get deeper from here on out. I woke up before sunrise, unsure if I had actually slept. It felt like I'd spent the whole night waiting for something. The pale light of dawn filtered through the gaps in the curtains, and as I packed my bag to leave early, I saw something that made my stomach churn. A doll, antique porcelain Victorian dress, face too pale. She was inside my suitcase, laying among my clothes, as if someone had carefully placed it there. The shock came along with another detail. Spanish moss trapped in the doll's hair, damp and cold, exactly like the hair hanging from the trees outside, and the smell of the children's room that I swore I saw. I picked it up with trembling hands. The texture of the moss was viscous, almost alive. The dress had accumulated dust as if it had been sitting somewhere other than this house for decades. And no matter how hard I tried to find an explanation, the only truth was simple. That doll, it didn't exist the day before. I went downstairs with her in my arms and knocked on the host's door. He looked like he hadn't slept well, deep dark circles under his eyes, red eyes. When I showed him the doll, his face lost its color. I don't have anything like that in the house," he murmured, taking a step back. "So how was that, in my suitcase?" My voice came out cracking. He didn't answer. At that exact moment, something hit the wall behind us. A dry sound, then another one. And then, small steps, dragged, coming from inside the wall itself. The host stood completely still, as if he recognized the sound. I went back up to my room, even though I knew it wasn't safe. And that's when I noticed, in the hallway, the wallpaper was slightly wavy, as if something behind him was trying to push, creating the shape of a door that didn't yet exist. That night, I barely blinked, and in the deepest hours of the night, I heard the whisper. Low. Distant. Time. And the worst part is that I didn't know if it was coming from the hallway, or from inside my head. I didn't want to spend another night in that house. But something Fear, exhaustion, or perhaps that feeling of being watched, kept me paralyzed. I sat on the bed, listening to the silence fold in on itself. That's when the temperature dropped. Suddenly, the air grew so cold that my breath began to escape in short, rapid bursts. The ceiling light flickered with a high-pitched hum as if struggling to stay lit. And in the hallway, the wallpaper started to move. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't lighting. It was as if something behind the wall was dragging its hands inside, searching for a way out. The faded flowers moved as if breathing. And, slowly, with a dry crack, the mark of a vertical crack appeared, exactly where the door should have been. The invisible wood creaked. And then, the door appeared, solid. Real.as if it had always been there. I didn't want to open it. My whole body was screaming to run. But my feet moved on their own, driven by the same instinct that makes someone look back in the middle of the night. The doorknob was cold. When I turned it, I felt something pull it back, with the lightness of a child's hand. The room was different, darker, more deteriorated. The toys were scattered across the floor, facing the door as if they had been dragged there in a hurry. The rocking chair, however, was motionless, perfectly still, as if someone had just gotten up from it seconds before. And in the corner, where the shadow was thickest, there was a small, motionless silhouette looking at me. I didn't see a face, no eyes, just a shape, waiting. The door slammed shut behind me. I screamed, or I think I yelled, because the next thing I remember is the host shaking me on the living room floor, repeating my name. The hallway was untouched. No door. Nothing. I left Savannah a few hours later, but when I opened my suitcase at the hotel already in another city, there it was, the doll. With pieces of floral wallpaper stuck between her porcelain fingers. I don't know what I went through in that house. But I know that something happened to me. Something happened to me, and so far I haven't found words that truly explain it. I arrived in Savannah late in the afternoon, after a far too long journey, trying to escape everything that had been haunting me for the past few months. Anxiety, insomnia, that constant feeling that something bad was always one step behind me. I just wanted silence. I just wanted a place where I could breathe without my mind screaming. The Airbnb in the Victorian district looked perfect in the photos. Historic, restored, and cozy. But when I walked in, I smelled a musty, old-fashioned scent of damp wood, as if the house had held breaths that weren't mine. The floor creaked with every step, not with the usual sound of old wood, but as if it were protesting my presence. I left my suitcase near the door and walked across the room. I swear, in the advertisement the sofa was on the opposite side. And the window, I remembered it being small and charming, now occupied almost half the wall, letting in an orange light that seemed from another era. "You're tired?" I murmured to myself. Maybe I was. My head was throbbing. On the first night, I woke up to a slow, dragging sound, like someone was pushing furniture around the house. The sound was coming from the hallway, echoing as if the space were larger than I remembered. But when I left the room, nothing. Everything was still. Everything was in absolute silence, so absolute that I even held my breath. The feeling of being watched came on suddenly, like a chill down my spine. I turned quickly, almost tripping on the rug, but there was no one there. Just the dark, longer hallway, or maybe it was just my imagination. I tried to go back to sleep, but the sound continued, very faint, as if someone were rearranging the house while I closed my eyes. When I woke up, my whole body felt heavy, as if I had slept inside a dense nightmare. The morning light streamed into the room, but it was different. Weaker, almost yellowish. I went down from the room slowly, still sleepy, and for a moment, I thought I had entered the wrong house. The room, it wasn't the same. The sofa was now made of old green velvet with carved wood. The curtains were thick, dark, and smelled of old dust. And the clock on the wall, I would have sworn it hadn't existed the day before. A pendulum clock, slow, marking each second like a drop of water falling into an empty room. I stood there in the middle of the room, trying to remember if all of that was already there. He wasn't. I knew he wasn't. I tried to convince myself that maybe the host had sent someone to rearrange the decor, but who does that without telling you? And why so much stuff, so old? When I went to the window, the shock was even greater. What I saw outside, it wasn't Savannah. Not the Savannah I knew. The street looked like it had come straight out of an 1890 photograph. Iron lampposts, carriages, people dressed in heavy, dark clothes. A man walked slowly past, hat on his head, and looked up as if he saw me. I blinked, and everything disappeared. The street returned to normal. Modern cars. Wet asphalt. The warm coastal breeze. My heart was beating so hard that I had to lean against the wall. "You're delirious," I whispered. But my voice trembled too much for me to believe it. That night, while I was trying to read to distract my mind, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow steps. Barefoot. But Airbnb was on the ground floor. I got up carefully, following the sound. The hallway seemed narrower, as if the house were breathing backward. And that's when I saw it. A new door, white, without a doorknob, at the end of the hallway. She wasn't there yesterday, that it couldn't be. And yet, it seemed to me that I was waiting. I woke up before sunrise, with that quiet restlessness that traps air in my chest. The house was freezing, much more so than it should have been for a Savannah night. When I opened the bedroom door, I immediately felt that something had changed again. The white door, the one without a handle, was now ajar. My stomach sank. Every instinct screamed at me to go back, lock the room, and wait for dawn, but something pulled me forward. Not curiosity. Not courage. Something deeper, as if the house had stuck its invisible fingers into the back of my neck and guided me. I pushed the door open slowly. It creaked as if it were being woken up. On the other side, there wasn't a normal room, but a room that didn't exist in the house plan, small, stuffy, with a musty smell mixed with a sweet perfume that gave me goosebumps. Inside, objects were scattered as if someone had lived there yesterday. Sepia photographs leaning against the wall, a dress hanging, a rusty lamp resting on a short table. In the larger photo, a woman with a serious expression. Her eyes. I swear they seemed to follow my movements. I felt a presence behind me, a slow, warm breath, almost touching my neck, that I turned around quickly, and there was no one there. When I looked back at the room, something worse had happened. The wall on the left now led to a narrow corridor, constructed of dark wood, illuminated by lit oil lamps. That I recognized that hallway. It was the same one I'd glimpsed in old advertisements for the house, except it shouldn't exist anymore. Not since the fire of 1902. The corridor seemed to pulse as if it were alive, and as I watched, a lamp lit itself, then another, and another, a whole row, as if guiding my way. My body froze. The feeling was clear, sharp, impossible to ignore. The house was opening up to me. I don't remember deciding to go down that hallway. All I remember is the sound of my breathing getting heavy, and the rain outside disappearing as if someone had turned off the world. When I realized it, my feet were already treading on that old, damp wood, which creaked as if it recognized my weight. The air was so thick it felt like fabric being pulled against my face. The lamps flickered slowly, illuminating just enough to reveal the next section of the path, never the end. Each step seemed to echo within me, not in the hallway. As if my body were resonating with that house that was changing, breathing, waiting. Halfway there, I heard a whisper behind me. Low, dragging, feminine. "You're back." I turned around so quickly I almost fell. There was nothing there. Just shadows hanging on the walls. But the air behind me was warm, as if someone had just spoken against the back of my neck. I kept walking, but now the whispering multiplied. 3, 4 voices, all female, all familiar in a way I couldn't understand. They laughed softly, like children hiding in a closet. With each step, I was certain that a hand would touch my back. When the corridor finally opened into a small circular room, I saw a figure standing in the center, but only its outline, as if the light wasn't allowed to touch it. She was a woman in an old dress, hair tied up, the same silhouette from the sepia photograph in the room. She didn't move, he didn't breathe, he only tilted his head slightly, as if he were seeing someone he had waited a long time for. And then she whispered, in a voice that seemed to come from within my own bones. "You've finally come home?" The door behind me slammed shut, the impact echoing like a gunshot. That I ran towards it instinctively, but there was no doorknob, no crack, nothing. Just solid, warm, living wood. When I pressed my face against hers, I heard what sounded like footsteps on the other side, many footsteps, approaching. As if something was coming. As if he were happy that I had nowhere to run. The figure in the center of the room took a step toward me, and I felt, with profound horror, that she knew me, that he knew my name, that I knew my past. And somehow, I knew that I no longer had a world out there. To this day, I don't know if I'm still in Savannah, or trapped in some forgotten version of it. That I don't know how much time has passed. All I know is that the house calls me by name every night, as if it were molding me. As if it were taking me over. Something happened to me, and I still can't explain it. If you're listening to this, I only ask one thing: don't doubt. Because that's exactly how, by doubting, my friends and I ended up in that cabin in the wetlands near Skidaway Island State Park in Savannah, Georgia. It was supposed to be a simple trip. A weekend to forget about work, college obligations. The road there had that heavy silence, the dampness clinging to the skin, and the smell of swamp growing stronger as we approached. The cabin seemed old but cozy. Dark wood, small porch, stuffy interior, and that feeling that it had been empty for far too long. Upon arrival, I noticed the first strange thing. One of the side windows was open, swinging as if someone had just let go of it. But no one commented. We laughed, joked, tried to act normal. It was easier to blame the wind than to admit the truth. Something there didn't want us to be there. The smell of stagnant water permeated everything. There were thin, drying mud marks around the hut, almost like footprints. But footprints off someone who crawls. As night fell, the temperature plummeted. And the swamp, which had previously seemed distant, began to emit low sounds, like a poorly tuned radio. An irregular hiss. Then, laughter. Short, high-pitched, childlike. I tried to ignore it. The others did too. We played cards, drank a little, but the feeling of we're being watched never went away. The wood creaked as if someone were walking on the roof. Later, already in bed, I heard the first scratch. Very faint dot on my bedroom wall. Slow scratches, spaced out, like fingernails. And then at 3:03 am someone knocked on the front door. Just once. Heavy. Calculated, like someone who has all the time in the world. And the swamp fell completely silent. I didn't sleep after that crash. Nobody slept. We sat in the living room in a circle, each pretending to be calmer than we really were. But I could tell. Trembling hands, short breaths, eyes wandering towards the windows. The light from the porch flickered, failing like an old lamp, until it went out completely, plunging everything into a freezing darkness. That's when we heard something else. Steps on the wooden balcony. Slow. Precise. 1, 2, 3. As I approached the window, something, a still silhouette. I was motionless. I was there, right in front of the glass. But when I shone my phone's light on it, there was nothing. Just the pale reflection of my own face. Ashley swore she saw a shadow cross the hallway. Mark said he heard someone laughing behind the cabin. I didn't want to admit it, but I'd heard that laugh before when we were still arriving, echoing from the swamp as if someone were hiding in the water. Things began to shift. Small things at first, a glass, a bag, the car keys. Then, more intensely, the bedroom door banging repeatedly on its own, as if something were pushing it with increasing force. The air inside the cabin became heavy, humid, difficult to breathe. The wooden floor seemed to pulse slightly underfoot. The scratch returned. This time, from inside from the wall, as if something were trying to break through the wood. When the cell phone clock turned to 3:03 am, sound started again. Now it wasn't a beat. It was 3.bm.bm.bm. Strong. Rhythmic. Impatient. And then, something scratched at the front door. Very slowly, long fingernails. Human. I felt a chill run up the back of my neck. A shiver that wasn't coming from the wind. It was as if the thing out there knew exactly who I was. As if it were calling me. We decided to flee before the next raid happened. We ran out as if the cabin were on fire. No one argued, no one looked back. The air outside was colder than before, as if the early morning had stood still in time. We got into the car, and Mark accelerated so hard that the wheels skidded in the mud. The road that leads to Skidaway Island State Park, it had always been narrow and winding, but that night it seemed endless. There was only darkness and fog, as if the whole world had been erased. The trees on both sides seemed to block the road, leaning over until they almost touched the car. At first we thought it was just panic. But then we realized, the laughter we heard outside, now they were coming from inside the car. Low. Suffocated. A child, or something trying to sound like one. Ashley started crying. I couldn't breathe properly. The feeling that someone was sitting in the back seat was so strong that I didn't dare turn my face away. The road repeated itself. We passed the same sign 3 times. Skid away, 7 miles. Mark swore he didn't make any U-turns. I confirmed it on the GPS. The arrow kept spinning endlessly. As if there was no correct direction, just an invisible circle holding us there. When a light appeared in the distance, we thought it was a car. Maybe that helps. Mark flashed his headlights. The light flickered back. But as we got closer, I realized the light wasn't coming from a car. She was coming from a balcony. The porch of a cabin. From our cabin. The engine sputtered, the car swayed, and for a second, I saw something in the rearview mirror. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a shadow. A form, something hunched over, sitting in the back seat next to me, breathing slowly as if watching me sleep. I screamed. The car crashed into a root. Everything went dark. And when I opened my eyes, I was lying on the same hard mattress as the first night. My friends were chatting in the kitchen. The same phrases, the same laughs. Same day. Everything's the same. I was the only one who remembered the escape. Waking up on that mattress, again, was worse than any scratch from the early morning. There wasn't a single mark of what had happened. No mud in the car. No bruises. No signs of impact. My friends were exactly as they were at the beginning of the trip, and everything I said seemed to make them uncomfortable, irritated, as if I were ruining something that shouldn't be touched. The déjà vu was suffocating. Every gesture, every phrase, every sound of the swamp happening in the same sequence. But there was a difference. The whispers, they started before nightfall. Low, dragging, always saying my name, as if the thing in the swamp had grown impatient. I was no longer trying to appear calm. My whole body was trembling. The walls seemed damper, as if they were breathing, and when I touched the wooden door, I felt marks, old, deep scratches that weren't there on the first day. As if my friends and I had already been through this dozens of times, and no one remembered except me. When night fell, the sounds began again. Scratches on the inside of the cabin. Footsteps circling the rooms. A sound of fingernails sliding on the glass of my bedroom window. And this time, a shadow moving beneath the doorway, not on the outside, within. I tried to get my friends to leave before dawn, but the front door just wouldn't open. As if someone was holding it from the other side. As if the loop was closed. The clock read 3:02 a.m. when the air stopped. Heavy, cold. To the 3:03 a.m. beat came. Not one. Not 3. But many. Desperate, coming from all the walls at once, as if the cabin were surrounded, or being crushed. The door latch turned slowly. I said law that I saw. A pale, slender hand reached through the crack, as if it were feeling the air, searching for me. I ran out the window and threw myself into the darkness of the road. The fog was so thick it drowned out the sound of my footsteps. The entire swamp seemed to breathe with me, as if it were a living, hungry organism. And before I fainted, I looked back. Just for a second. In the broken rearview mirror of an abandoned car, I saw myself. But my reflection was smiling. I woke up in the cabin. Again, and now, someone is breathing in my room. Behind me, very close. So close I can feel the warm air on the back of my neck. I'm not going to turn around, because I think that, this time, it's not the loop restarting. If you've listened this far, thank you for staying with me in the dark. And if someone knocks on your door today at 3:03 a.m., I hope it's not because of me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and if you still have the courage, write in the comments, I heard the whispers. Something happened to me, and so far I haven't found the courage to tell anyone. But for some reason I feel that if I don't get it out, this thing will keep following me, wherever I go. I arrived in Savannah, Georgia. It was a stifling night, filled with that damp smell of wet wood that seemed to seep into your lungs. I was exhausted, not just from the trip, but from my own life. I needed distance, silence, anything that would make me forget what I left behind. The Airbnb seemed perfect for that. A restored historic house near Bonaventure Cemetery. The advertisement said, "Original decor pieces obtained at local auctions." I didn't know that included that. The hostess wasn't there when I arrived. He just left the key in an envelope on the porch. The house had that kind of old-world beauty that makes you uneasy without knowing why. The floor creaked under my footsteps. The walls were covered with portraits of people who seemed to follow me with their gaze, and the mirrors. There were so many. Large, heavy, with gilded frames, smelling of centuries of dust and stories that no one should hear. I was putting away my clothes when I noticed the first oddity. In the hallway mirror, for a moment, I thought there was someone behind me. A woman, standing still, motionless, wearing an old, almost Victorian dress, completely out of place. When I turned quickly, the hallway was empty. Only the distant sound of the wind rustling against the windows. I tried to laugh at myself, but my voice died in my throat. Because deep down I felt it wasn't my imagination. Too felt someone behind me. A chill ran down my neck as if a pair of eyes were glued to me, watching me breathe. I spent the rest of the night trying to avoid any reflective surface. But there were so many mirrors that it was impossible to walk through the house without seeing my own face, or what I thought was just my own. I tried to go about my routine the next day, pretending nothing had happened. Drink coffee, open my laptop, answer overdue emails, but it was impossible to ignore the feeling that something in the house was breathing along with me. Every time I passed one of the old mirrors, I had the impression that the woman was a little more defined in the reflection. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. Now there were details, the rigid outline of the old dress, the overly pale skin, the empty face, as if her eyes were always a second behind, trying to catch up with me. While I was cooking, I heard something that froze me. Shuffling steps. The sounds were slow, as if someone were walking behind me, their own body weight pulling their feet along the ground. I turned so quickly that I dropped the spoon. The sound stopped instantly. But the reflection in the microwave right in front of me showed something else. She was there, standing a few meters from me. Without blinking, I turned everything off and went to the bathroom, trying to take a deep breath. The light flickered as if the house were holding its breath with me. The bathroom mirror was smaller but old too. And when I looked, I swear on everything I own, she was closer. So close that it seemed like her face was touching the glass. I felt a sudden chill, so real that my fingers went numb. A short, irregular breath began to escape me, but there was another. A slow, light breath, in the mirror. As if she were on the other side, trying to synchronize hers with mine. That night, I woke to a metallic sound, a heavy dragging on the hallway floor. When I turned on the light, I noticed that a mirror, the same one from the first day, was out of place. A few centimeters off the wall. As if someone had tried to pull it. Or as if someone were trying to leave. I don't know exactly when I realized I was losing control. Maybe it was when I tried to take the mirrors off the wall. It was the middle of the night and I was overcome by a mixture of panic and despair. I ripped off the first one, then the second. I hid both inside the closet and pushed a chest of drawers on top, trembling as if I were committing a crime. I spent hours collecting every reflection in the house, avoiding looking at any glass, any polished metal, any surface that could reveal something I didn't want to see. But when I woke up hours later, the sound of the creaking floor called me into the hallway. The mirrors were back. All of them. Each one in its exact original place. Perfectly aligned. Perfectly clean. As if my hands had never touched them. From that moment on, I wasn't just scared. I was being watched. That night, I noticed another change. She wasn't so far away anymore. In the reflection, the woman approached almost imperceptibly, as if advancing an inch each day whenever I looked away. Her face was clearer now, but still impossible to understand. There was no expression, no emotion. It was as if she were observing for the sake of observing, as if my existence were new to her. And then came the sound. I was sitting on the living room floor looking at the carpet when I heard something hit the glass of the nearest mirror. 3 taps. Clear. Cold. Measured. My whole body froze. I didn't have the courage to lift my head, but my eyes involuntarily rose until they met the reflection. She had raised her hand. In the real world, nothing. But in the mirror, Her palm touched the other side as if pressing hard enough for the glass to give way. A vapor formed there like human breath on a winter's day. But the house was warm. Very warm. I tried to film everything, desperate. I pointed my phone at the mirror, and almost threw up when I saw the recording. The camera only showed you alone, terrified, staring into the void. But I saw her hand. I swear I saw it. Last night, something changed in the air of the house. The temperature was lower, much lower than any other day, as if someone had left all the windows open, but they were locked. I slept badly, every muscle tense, my heart beating at a rhythm that no longer felt like mine. And when I woke up, the world was wrong. I first noticed it because of the silence. A silence so profound I could hear my own blood rushing through my ears. Then because of the weight of the air, as if the house were waiting for me to open my eyes. When I finally lifted my head, I froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. All the mirrors in the house were in my room. All of them. Each one of them, big and small, old and cracked, forming a perfect circle around the bed. Like a ceremony. Like a ritual. I didn't do it. I swear I didn't. And then I looked at the reflections. She was there, in dozens of versions surrounding my reclining body. But there was something worse. In each mirror she was at a different distance. In one, her face was just a few meters away. In the next, almost touching the glass. In another, her face completely pressed against the surface, her skin crushed, amorphous, as if it wanted to pierce through. I tried to stand, but my knees gave way. I stumbled, fell onto a mirror, heard the crack of the glass breaking, and for a second I thought that had freed something. Because in the shards scattered on the floor, in every tiny piece smaller than a fingernail, she was still there. Watching. Infinitely replicated in fragments that trembled with my breath. I ran. I ran like I was fleeing a fire. I didn't look back, I didn't grab anything, I left everything behind. Cell phone, suitcase, documents. I just needed to get out of that house. But the worst was yet to come. In the hotel I found in a hurry, there was a small mirror in the bathroom. I washed my face, trying to convince myself that it had all been a delusion, a figment of my tired mind. I took a deep breath. I lifted my face. And in the reflection, behind me, she was there. Clearer than ever. I don't know what she wants. I don't know why she chose me. But if you've listened this far, comment, I saw the hostess. And please, if you want more stories like this, follow the voice.